This town is Veliky Novgorod, one of the oldest cities in Russia. It was the first capital of Russia and in the Middle Ages the second most important centre of Kievan Rus after Kiev. There are many who would regard this town as being the very cradle of Russian civilization. In 1478 it was captured by the Moscow Principality under its ruler Ivan III. After the creation of St. Petersburg in the 18th century, the city lost its economic importance, but its historic buildings remain. Almost all were damaged or destroyed during the war, but they have been rebuilt. In 1727, Novgorod became the centre of the Novgorod province, and 200 years later, in 1927, it became part of the Leningrad region. In mid-August 1941, Lieutenant General Otto Sponheimer's 21st Infantry Division, part of General Hoepner's 4th Panzer Group, pushed its way through swamps and along a strongly fortified main road towards Novgorod. Resistance was fierce, the terrain suited the defence. German casualties were mounting. However, a stroke of luck aided the attackers. A map taken from a Soviet major killed in action was found. It showed the Soviet 48th Army's entire position along the Verenda River, which flows into Lake Ilmen. The map gave the exact locations of fortified positions, dummy positions, gun emplacements and machine gun posts. Then there was another piece of luck. A prisoner from the Karelian ethnic minority, a Finn, was captured, and he provided the fortification maps of Novgorod as well as the plans of the minefields. On the morning of the 15th of August 1941, the 3rd Infantry Regiment saw the glint of the golden church domes of Novgorod in the morning sun. At 17:30 hours that day, the 8th Air Corps began a heavy air raid on the Soviet positions in front of and in Novgorod. This destroyed a large part of the ancient capital, and it would be many years again before anyone witnessed such a glint of golden church domes in the morning sun. By dawn the following day, the 16th of August 1941, the German assault companies were already inside the ruined city. At 0700 hours, the swastika flew over the Novgorod Kremlin. Some 50 kilometers to the northeast of Novgorod is Chudovo. This was an important transport hub, and Manstein ordered its capture in order to sever the link between Leningrad and Moscow. Spanish troops of the Volunteer Blue Division arrived in Novgorod. Following the capture of Novgorod, after a short period of military rule, the Nazis installed their own government assisted by people such as Vasily Ponomarev and Boris Filistinsky. The city's first mayor under Nazi occupation, Fyodor Ivanovich Morozov, was killed by a young Spanish soldier during an attempted robbery. During the occupation, a great deal of the cultural heritage of the first capital of Russia was lost. All wooden buildings burned down. Collections in archaeology, history and art were stolen from the Novgorod Museum. Industries were destroyed. The material damage caused to Novgorod, according to the report of the Extraordinary Commission on the Atrocities of the Fascist Invaders, amounted to over 11 billion rubles. During the main Nuremberg trial on the 20th of November 1945, Novgorod, alongside Stalingrad, Sevastopol, Kiev, Minsk, Odessa, Smolensk, Pskov, Oryel, Kharkiv, Voronezh, Rostov-on-Don, Stalino, now Donetsk, and Leningrad were mentioned as being amongst the most damaged cities of the Soviet Union. A local Wehrmacht commander in Novgorod had requested the use of 3 buildings to house troops in the city, which were used as care homes for the mentally ill. The battles to capture the city had been hard. Novgorod was relatively close to the front, and with winter approaching, the troops needed somewhere to live. In both occupied Poland and inside the Third Reich proper, buildings that had once been care homes had been given over for use by the military. Whereas thousands of people had fled Novgorod, mainly in the direction of Leningrad, the damage to the buildings they had been living in during the fighting meant that there was a requirement for shelter. I presume that the commander who made the request knew that the occupants of care homes had been murdered, and the real estate that they had occupied had been given to the SS or Wehrmacht. On the 21st of September 1941, the Quartermaster General of the Wehrmacht, Eduard Wagner, later to be involved in the attempted coup against Hitler on the 20th of July 1944, asked about the policy towards inmates of asylums in the occupied territories. On the 26th of September 1941, he accepted that killing the occupants was necessary, and on the 1st of October 1941, he mentioned the Novgorod mental health care homes. Wagner was not speaking out of character. Earlier that month, he had written to his wife to say that the German army could not feel responsible for the 3.5 million people in Leningrad who would only be using the Wehrmacht's food supplies, and that Soviet POWs who did not work should not be fed. It was he who discussed with Reinhard Heydrich where the lines of responsibility were to be geographically drawn with the military, and was thus clearly aware of the activities of the SS behind the front. He also believed that the British working class was racially inferior. The ruins of Novgorod were recaptured by the Red Army on the 20th of January 1944. In December 1947, the last major trial of Nazi criminals in the Soviet Union took place in Novgorod, although not for crimes committed in that city.